Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and thank you for joining me for folks' favorite Fandom Fridays. Now, usually on these Fridays, I get the chance to visit with somebody from the wide world of the Tolkien fandom, but a couple of weeks back, I explained that I'd be making a change for the rest of Series 7, spending the rest of them chatting with other folks in the Tolkien community who are at San Diego ComicCon and the Amazon events there as well, in order to share all of our experiences with you. Now, because I want to catch everybody when their memories are fresh, all of these conversations are happening with folks shortly after Comic-Con. In fact, I think all of them are going to be done by the 6th of August. So the fact is you're watching these things that are going to be coming out after the show's dropped. Sometimes I think, Corey, your episode's going to be coming out the day after those first 3 episodes come. But you're recording this 3 weeks earlier. So folks, keep that in mind if any of his predictions are completely off track. Now,
and on the outside chance
on the tiny chance that your predictions will be off. Today's guest, folks, should be very familiar to you. And if he's not, then you've not listened to them many times. He's been on the PPP or the time he joined me here in week 23 for Fandom Friday or any of the gazillion podcasts that he himself runs. So folks, please join me in welcoming again the OG Tolkien podcaster, the Tolkien Professor himself, Dr. Corey Olsen, back to today's Tolkien Times.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Alan.
Always a privilege, Corey. Thank you. So there's a big question. It could probably take up the next half hour. What have you been up to in the Tolkien fandom since you last joined me November of last year?
Lots of stuff. Well, I think since November, we've gotten about 5, maybe 6 pages further through the Journey in the Dark.
That sounds about
we're
right.
now in Moria. We crossed over, Prancing Pony, your discussion and mine crossed over in the Hall of Fire, right? At Rivendell. And you've finished now, almost
we
finished
have,
now?
Actually, yeah. The final episode of season 8 dropped just a couple of days ago as I record this. Yeah.
There we go. And I am not quite to the Bridge of Khazad Dûm. So, there we go.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it.
No, it's been great. We just, Pippin just dropped the stone, and we were just discussing that last week. We just discussed the Tom Tap Tap Tom response to Pippin's dropping the stone. Anyway, so no, it's been great. It's really the slow burn of exploring Lord of the Rings has been fantastic. Meanwhile, we're also doing in other things. Silmarillion film project has been just continues to be delightfully fun. We're in season 7 there. For people who aren't familiar with that, we've been planning, this has been going on for 10 years already. We've been planning a theoretical TV adaptation of the Silmarillion.
In case you ever get the license.
It's all set. We've got it. We've got everything. In fact, we've been writing scripts and everything. So anyway, the Silmarillion film project has been great. We're in season 7 now, which is the Nir Naithar Nuidiad season, and I think we just had our last episode in which no one dies. So
spoiler, just about everybody does. Yeah.
No, there's we're thinking of having a tiers meter, right? How many, and until we push it all the way up to unnumbered, by the end of the season. Yeah, exactly. The tiers are numerous, but still quantifiable at this stage of the season.
That's the problem. They are finite. Yeah.
We'll get there later on.
We will.
The one of the main things, of course, is we're preparing for Rings and Realms, the second season of the analysis show that we did last time. Maggie and I did. So we're running a Kickstarter for that, and it's been a lot of fun planning that.
Good. Well, that actually brings me into my next question, which is to talk a little bit about Rings of Power. I want to talk about our experiences at San Diego ComicCon. What was your highlight, or maybe what were your highlights from the Thursday night event or Hall H on Friday? And then second part of the question, what was it that you learned at the event that has made you more excited for the launch of season 2 of the Rings of Power?
Well, so, for me, the Thursday night event, getting to meet and spend some time with the cast again was really fun. It was really fun doing it the second time. It was very novel and exciting, to meet the cast last time around.
2 years ago,
it was really fun this time to be able to, like see the cast across the room, and they recognize you, and it's kind of more of a reunion than a meeting. And that whole atmosphere of it, I think, was particularly fun. I have to say, one of the things that was really interesting and rewarding was seeing how you can tell there are members of the cast that have been studying over the last few years.
Yeah.
And this was my favorite Hall H moment, actually. So in the Hall H panel, so last time in 2022, when we were meeting folks the first time, it was delightful to meet Ismael Cruz Cordova, who plays Arondir. He's, I think, possibly the most charismatic human being I've ever been in a room with.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, I just have never seen anyone magnetize a room the way
he just lights up
does when he walks in.
Exactly. He really does.
It's incredible. But anyway, it was fun meeting him, and yet, like, I got the impression that he was on the low end of the cast as far as his Tolkien familiarity.
Well, right. Whereas like Robert Romeo and Lloyd Owen were near the top. And yeah, exactly. And
again, which is fine. Like, that happened. Certainly happened in Peter Jackson films.
Not everybody needs to be a lore master. Yeah.
Exactly right. But then in Hall H, somebody asked a question about Ents.
Yeah.
And it was Ismail who grabs his mic and says, "Well, of course, the Ents were made by Yavanna in order to protect the trees." And I was like, "Look who's dropping the lore now!"
I loved it. Yes.
And I was talking to Maxim Baldry, who plays Isildur, and again, he also was not high on the lore master ladder last time, but he'd been reading the Silmarillion. We were like discussing where he'd gotten up to in the Silmarillion so far and stuff. So I mean, it was just that was really fun to kind of see how even the cast who was not fully into it, the lore and stuff last time have really been digging deeper into it, and that was really cool to see.
I agree. It does seem like they've really embraced it, and it's really, like you said, just an encouragement to see, and it was fun to sort of be surprised by that, But yeah, and I have to say, just echo your thoughts on it feeling like a reunion with old friends rather than I think the first time I was so starstruck that I was just a little bit nervous, and I didn't. It was just. This time around, it was, oh, hey, good to see you again. How things been?
Exactly.
And, just chatting. And we sitting here chatting with Tristan Gravel about, Welsh rugby and facial hair. I mean, it was just fantastic.
Yes. Tristan is such a great person to chat with.
They all are, but it's really good. So what were the one or two things that you saw or heard or found out during those couple of days there that makes you more excited for season 2? Well, besides maybe just everybody being up on the lore.
You're right. That was good. No, for me, it was getting a clearer sense of the sort of the narrative shape of things. And this was, first of all, that was, I thought, unusually apparent in the trailer that was released.
Yeah.
A lot of times trailers are, you can tell they're like jumbles of images, and sometimes occasionally, of course, trailers can try active misdirection, but sometimes even, like the way it cuts from one scene to another kind of gives the impression of continuity, which isn't really there. And, I'm sure we've all had the experience of watching a trailer and getting a sense of like, oh, this sequence happens. And then you recognize those two shots in the film and they're like 30 minutes apart and whatever, so, often that's, the experience with trailers, but I felt that this trailer that they released while we were there at ComicCon really has an unusual kind of narrative integrity to it. The way that it really kind of begins unfolding the Anatar story. And even the way, and this I found kind of particularly impressive, seemed to address one of the chief fan reactions to the teaser trailer that came out, right? So we got the teaser trailer where we saw the images of Anatar for the first time and stuff. And a lot of people in response to that were like, but it's obviously Charlie Vickers in a blonde wig. Like, and so people were making all the Clark Kent jokes and being like, how is he, like, are we really supposed to think he's deceiving Celebrimbor by putting on a blonde wig and he'll never recognize him again? Yeah, exactly. And there was, and I wasn't that concerned about it, because I'm like, well, I'm not sure that that's what's happening there, but whatever. There was a lot of people talking about that. Yeah. And they totally, like, they exposed the actual story to that within the first 10 seconds of the trailer. They really showed, okay, you can plainly see, and it seems to be very clearly narrative sequence. No. Halbrand in Halbrand form comes back to Celebrimbor, says, actually, like, this is just a secret identity. I'm really somebody else that hasn't been revealed to you yet. And boom, I'm Anatar, right?
Messenger from the Valar. Yeah.
Messenger from the Valar, right? That I didn't want to show this to anybody else, but you, Celebrimbor.
You're special, Celebrimbor.
You're special.
Tell you the very special things. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to share the gifts with you, right? Actually, a lot of people were not sure about the sharer of gifts thing.
Yeah, it's a little off. It's not Lord of Gifts, but okay, I'll let it go.
But you can see how
he is actually Anatar. I mean, like
he is actually Anatar. Yeah, exactly. In fact, Patrick was saying that in that scene, like right after he calls himself the sharer of gifts, he calls himself Anatar. Yeah, and they actually wanted to include that. They're like the showrunners were pitching to the trailer people to like include where he says the name Anatar in the trailer, so that there can be no further confusion about this. And the fact that it's not there shows you that the showrunners are not in complete control of what gets included in the trailer.
Certainly not in the way things are marketed. Yeah, you're right.
Right, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. You can see some of the divisions there is one little interesting side effect there. But anyway, the point is, you can see, if you think about it, again, it's one of so many examples where people tend to react without really analyzing it, right? Yeah. Yes, Anatar means Lord of Gifts, but by introducing himself as the sharer of gifts, it shows the angle that he's taking with Celebrimbor, right? He's good, and we see him at the end of the trailer, right, being more like, where are the nine, right, being more authoritative with Celebrimbor. He's gonna, like, they're gonna get there, but they don't start there. And this is something that several of the people emphasized. The showrunners were saying that in their mind, the whole psychological drama of Celebrimbor and Anatar, and Sauron, is the whole heart and core of season 2. When I was talking with, and I got to talk to both Charlie Vickers and Charles Edwards. Yeah. And, Charles Edwards said that remarkably, uniquely in his his non-stage acting experience, they filmed the entire Anatar Celebrimbor sequence in order.
Yeah, which
so
is
that
rare
the actors
could very rare.
Yeah. So that they could have the whole, sense of the arc of that entire story. Charlie Vickers said that for a while, he and Charles Edwards felt like they were in like a kitchen drama. It felt like a stage production, because it was just like the two of them on their own in the same room talking,
all the time.
Talking for like scene after scene after scene. Of course, like they're interspersed with other scenes, and it's not just them standing around talking. But that really is their emphasis there is going to be on that drama, and it seems, I mean, again, based on what they were saying, part of their whole core, central to their whole concept of Sauron, Sauron as manipulator and deceiver, which is going to have the long arc all the way through to the end of the Numenor sequence, right. And we were I was briefly talking to Charlie Vickers about how much I am looking forward to the Sauron in Numenor segment of the show, which is probably season 4. I don't know that for sure. That's a guess.
That is a guess. Yeah, no, it's not going to be season 2. We know that.
It's not season 2 for sure.
It should be. I'm almost imagining that he's captured at the end of season 3. So yeah, you're right. Season 4 would be the season of influence. Yeah. No, I would think. Yeah, I would think the capture of Sauron happens at the end of season 3. The fall of Numenor happens at the end of season 4. Yeah. So that the last alliance would be season 5. I mean, that's at least like that makes sense to me. I mean, I guess they could start season 5 with the fall. like lead us, like kind of leave us hanging, so to speak. But that would be a huge budget season if they start with the fall of Numenor and end with the Last Alliance.
yeah, that would be a lot.
That'd be a lot.
But anyway, as I was saying, that's one example. The Sauron, the Anatar Celebrimbor thing is one example of just how I felt after the conversations and after the footage that we saw, a much clearer sense of the narrative trajectory of the show. Patrick McKay said a really interesting thing. He said, in season one, we were doing world building, character building. We were, writing our own stories in order to frame the things that were happening. In season two, we're finally beginning to do adaptation. Because there's a real story there. It's very brief, right? I mean, the Anatar story is like how many paragraphs? Like it's very short. But anyway, it exists. Like there's an actual
shorter
narrative.
If we don't include the Unfinished Tales bit.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be interesting. Well, Corey, what is your wildest prediction for season 2? And folks, please keep in mind, he's answering this 3 weeks before the series drops, even though you're going to see it the day after the first 3 episodes drop.
Wildest prediction. Oh, I just had a fairly wild prediction. So one of the predictions that I continue to, I'll start with a non-wild one.
Okay.
And then my wildest that I still remain confident in.
Okay.
The non-wild one is that the Stranger is a blue wizard and they're doing the blue wizard stories.
I hope so, but
yeah. That remains. I've been saying this since the end of season 1. Everything that we're seeing absolutely appears to confirm that. Even down to the existence of magic cults in the East, right? That we're seeing, right?
So they're going to go with Gandalf and Saruman just because those are the names that the vast majority of people know. But I hope you're right.
And at the end of the day, if what we get is Gandalf the Blue, I can live with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but basically, what I've wanted, what I've hoped for the whole time is that we would get the Blue Wizard stories.
Yeah.
I would love to actually have them called the Blue Wizards. I still don't think, by the way, that is, I do not believe he's going to turn out to be Gandalf.
My fear has been like, so in season 1, I kept thinking, it's too obvious that Halbrand's Sauron, therefore Halbrand isn't Sauron. Right. I mean, that was kind of the trap I fell into. I double bluffed myself. And I feel like I'm being tempted to do the same thing with the Stranger, that, it's too obvious for him to be Gandalf, so it must not be Gandalf, but I'm afraid it's going to be Gandalf.
Well, I think the only thing that seems to people to make it obvious is that like the whole, following your nose line, right?
And the affinity for the Harfoots.
I don't know. I find those really weak. Like what that says to me is wizard hobbit relationship, not Gandalf personally, like not an identification with Gandalf personally. Anyway, like I said, I'm totally unconvinced by it.
I hope
and
you're
I
right.
won't be
100% I'm on your side.
If they do concede to, a sort of popular demand or, like a wish to see the familiar wizards, whatever, then, I can live with it. But again, at the end of the day, I don't care because they're doing the Blue Wizard stories. And again, so just to, I don't know how much we need to explain.
So that's not your wild guess. What is your wild guess?
That's not my wild guess. Here's my wild prediction. And I don't think it's possible for it to be fulfilled in season 2, but keep it in mind.
Okay.
My wild prediction is that Eärien, sister of Isildur, is going to become a Nazgul.
Ooh.
Yes, and I'm feeling better and better about that prediction all the time.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, not that I think there's anything that explicitly pointed to Nazgul, but that she is starting down the left-hand path, I think is pretty clear. I think you're right. That she, and this was something, I think it was in Hall H they talked about. Yeah, it was in Hall H. Lloyd Owen was talking about the trouble that his daughter is giving him.
Yes.
And is giving to Elendil, of course, and that she is going to be. I mean, we saw how upset she was when they were leaving, when the army was leaving, right? And that seems clearly to be setting up her to be even more upset when Isildur is dead, and she's gonna, so that she's going to be on Team Pharazôn seems almost certain at this point.
I think you combine that with the apparent interest with Pharazôn's son Kemen and her career as an architect. Somebody who might build a 500-foot across temple.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Quite possibly. Yeah. So no, I mean, of course, the game I've been playing all along with all of the human characters in the show is Dead or Nazgul, right? They're all going to end up either dead or Nazgul.
Yeah, no, that's
Dead or
a very
Nazgul,
good point.
right?
Yeah. Theo, Dead or Nazgul? Oh, Nazgul. Yeah.
Nazgul. Yeah. Bronwyn, Dead or Nazgul? Dead. Obviously. I mean, I said that even last season, that she was going to end up dead rather than Nazgul. Because again, they're all going to die. Like, I mean, they're mortals, right? So
I love it. This is great. Dead or Nazgul? Yeah.
Dead or Nazgul.
Fair enough. I like that. All right.
Yeah.
One more quick question. Back in November of last year, when you were first here on a Fandom Friday, I asked you to put yourself in Amazon's shoes, and I said, tell me what you do to help the community of Tolkien content creators connect with the show again heading into season 2. Now that we've been to San Diego ComicCon and talked with our folks at Amazon, what are your thoughts? Any missteps? Maybe what did they do really well? What would you do if you were them in terms of our community going forward?
I think that, so first of all, the thing that's been most encouraging is that there has plainly been a pivot from the let's stir up mystery and speculation approach to marketing that they did in season 1. There's a great deal of transparency. Goodness, Patrick and JD are just busting at the seams to tell everybody. No, exactly. I mean, it was another favorite moment in Hall H, right, where there kept being questions from the audience, which you expect, so there's somebody who asks a question from the audience, and the actors would all look at each other like, can we answer that? I'm not sure we can answer that. Do you? And then they'd all kind of look over at JD and Patrick, who would jump in and answer the question. The favorite moment was, this guy came up to the microphone and it's every single Tolkien adaptation that's ever been has cut Glorfindel's role, right? Bakshi gave it to Legolas. Peter Jackson gave it to Arwen. Exactly. He always. Poor Glorfindel always ends up on the cutting room floor. Are we finally going to get an adaptation that includes Glorfindel? And the cast are all looking at each other and everything. And Patrick takes his microphone and says, yes.
Yeah. Surprise casting Liv Tyler has been my inside joke since then, but I hope not.
Right, exactly. That would be a way to
he's always been on the cutting room floor. It's sort of there's so many characters that you're like, oh, but what if, I mean, I'm thinking of Erkenbrand is another guy who would be great, but we've never seen him. We'll never see him. I never thought we'd see Tom, but we're going to see Tom.
We're going to see Tom. Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, point is the showrunners are obviously being more forthcoming this time around, but the marketing people also, they're never quite as comfortable being transparent as the showrunners are.
You can tell. I think that's in their DNA.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember one of them when I was talking about, I was making posts and stuff from Comic-Con, and they're like, just try to avoid spoilers. I'm like, what are you talking about, spoilers? I can't think of anything to spoil that they haven't been talking about in public all day long. Yeah, but anyway, I even asked them. I mean, I was introduced. I met this guy at a party, and I was introduced, and he was like, "Oh, he's one of our marketing strategy people." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's interesting." So I just asked him straight up. I'm like, so is this part of your strategy for this year, that you're being more transparent and more direct? And he said, yeah, no, that's absolutely been the strategy so far. So it's not just us. It doesn't just look like it. They really have been doing that. Now, to what extent is that, a response to fan responses? But I think it was.
At some level, it has to be, right? Why would they change otherwise? There had to be some level of feedback that they heard, whether it was from the fans in general or whether it was from, people like us that are sort of in that circle of, people in the Tolkien fandom that are, I don't know, whatever.
Right.
Observable. Yep. I was going to say notable, but that only applies to you. So.
Not true.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I mean, I do think that there was some interesting response there. As far as what they could do more or differently. I still think there's been some progress on this front.
Mm-hmm.
I still think that there is more that they could do to involve. So, I mean, I'm a big advocate for the usefulness of analysis, like like in-depth, deep dive stuff. I mean, obviously, that's what I do, but I was saying, and I told all the marketing people that I could talk to last time, I'm like, look, this is a show that really, it improves the more you think about it.
Yeah.
Like, people who just watch it and have an immediate reaction to it, like, are not going to appreciate it nearly as well. I mean, they're both, because there were some things you had to look past, and also there's just some things you had to think about.
Yeah.
It was a show with, in a sense, a fairly high degree of difficulty. It was demanding. It asked a lot of its viewers. It really did. Even, and perhaps especially, from a Tolkien standpoint, it's another really remarkable thing about this adaptation is that, we all expected, to some extent, that this, like so many other adaptations, would be like shooting for like a sort of a least common denominator, right? Like, oh, well, those of us who know Tolkien really well, like, this is not really going to be for us. This is going to be for like the common fan.
Especially and television, there was an assumption for that,
Exactly. And yet, well, what I found constantly all the way through is people responding and saying, oh, that's not Tolkien. And I'm like, well, actually it is. It's just Tolkien from the peoples of Middle Earth.
Right.
Not Tolkien from the Lord of the Rings. So
they were diving deeper than we thought they would. Yeah.
Yeah, way deeper. And therefore, there was a lot that needed unpacking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even some comparatively simple issues, right? There were a lot of people who knew their Tolkien really well, who were like, hey, the Astari don't come in the Second Age. The Astari come in year 1000 of the Third Age. And it's like, hey, man, like, good homework. You're not wrong about that from an Appendix B perspective. But actually, Tolkien did write a version of the story in which they came in the Second Age later on in notes. Like, that's there in Tolkien's world, and they chose that version of the story. But even like some fairly hardcore Tolkien fans aren't familiar with that because it's really
I had forgotten about it initially because I've been so focused on maybe the Unfinished Tales version, at least. I mean, going deeper than Appendix B, but I'd forgotten about the drafts and things like that.
Yeah,
so that was really interesting.
There's crazy deep cuts, and these are all clearly things that they're thinking about. They're going. So again, there's so much more there to kind of get and to think about and to see what they're wrestling with and what they're suggesting and what. But you've got to really stop and think about it. So I've been saying from the beginning, again, to everyone who would listen, which is not that many people, that like we need to like this needs more unpacking. This needs more explanation. So I do think I mean it's great for them to give us access and stuff like that, and that's great. And I would say they've been a lot of people, of course, are under the impression that like we're like rigidly controlled in what we can say and everything like that, and it's not true. They've never tried to stop us or whatever for like not liking the show or whatever.
As could be
we're under no obligation.
I gave it two years ago.
right.
It's pretty hard on
but in any case, the thing that I have suggested to them that I would like to see more is, again, more to avail themselves more of the resources that they have in us, right? In people like you and me and, and Matt and some of the Torn folks and many others. One suggestion I had, for instance, I was like, Hall H is awesome. Everybody loves the Hall H panel. It's not about that, but you know what? We're all going to be there, right? Why don't you get another panel and have us do an analysis of season 1 in anticipation of season 2 panel? Put us all on this panel.
That would have been fantastic.
Have us lead a large group of people through this kind of like, let's think this stuff through. Let's analyze this. And again, in my experience with how people have responded to that, how they responded to Rings and Realms and other things that I've been involved in, people always emerge saying like, well, there's much more to think about in this show than I thought there was originally. I mean, it's why people have been really enjoying shows like yours and, Matt's breakdowns and everything else that, that you can find there. But I think that they're not, we are sort of here as a resource. They could
True.
sort of showcase that, I think, a good deal more,
That's
which would just really help. And they tend, I think, to think, well, unsurprisingly, like marketing people. That is, they tend to think of people like us first and foremost as people who might be able to help them publicize things, right?
Yeah.
And spread the word. And that's understandable. Thinking about social media, marketing and networking and things like that. But I think that that's only one small section of what, our kind of cohort has to offer. There's some sign that they're kind of, I think, moving a little bit more in that direction, but they've been still sort of slow to adopt that. And I think it would be to their advantage.
Well, hopefully we'll see them do exactly that. I certainly would have loved to have been on a panel with you and Matt. And
wouldn't that be awesome?
Oh, that'd be fantastic. So much fun. Got to get James and Sarah in there too. And Maggie, completely. Obviously. So that would have been a fantastic panel, actually, now that I think about it. Man.
You really would.
All right. Well, okay, Amazon folks, now you know what to do.
Yeah.
Corey, thank you again for joining me today. As always, it was a joy to see you in San Diego at ComicCon. I know that in your case, I will see you again before Rings of Power Season 3 comes out, unlike many of the other folks in the community.
Yes.
And that'll be wonderful. But folks, that is it for today's Fandom Friday. Come back next Friday to meet another of your fellow Tolkien fans and maybe even learn what niches of the community you might be interested in exploring. And if you're interested in joining me here for a future Fandom Friday, please let me know by emailing bartleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a bonus weekly episode, and more. And please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up the week with Second Age Saturday. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You know the drill. And please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps. Follow at Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.